So what was going on in terms of both of you? So you've got this little business that you're starting, you've got some connections with other companies, and then suddenly the CMS are investigating you. You've got the pandemic. What's going on for you guys at that point now?
We were both absolutely horrified, to be honest with you. Trying to make any understanding of anything at all, it just didn't make sense, because we had received a letter from the FIU with their findings, but it wasn't a breakdown of their findings. So once we'd received the amounts that they were going to change the yearly liability to, and they actually provided information that they were actually basing it on limited company turnover figures.
What does that mean?
So basically, whatever we made as a turnover within the business, they were using that full amount.
Whatever you had made in that year, regardless of whether or not it was you were having to plow that money back into the business to keep the business going, they just saw that as your profit and then based their calculations upon that.
Yeah. So they didn't take anything into account at all. So prior to that, we were actually invited to a financial investigations unit interview. And I declined temporarily at that point because I wanted a full breakdown of how they got to these figures, because I couldn't make any understanding of it and the accountant couldn't make any understanding of it. So I wanted that to justify and read for myself to find out where the hell they got this information from.
I think that's entirely sound way of thinking, because I wonder how many other people have gone through something similar and they've had a calculation, but yet there's been no breakdown of how they got to that. I've been in the same situation myself, and we have also asked the CMS for, how did you get to this figure? We would like a breakdown of how you got to this number here, from what?
So the other issue that we had is the fact that they were using limited company turnover figures, but they were not our business turnover figures. So again, questions were raised in whose turnover are you using and what turnover are you using? So again, it didn't make sense that they were using a turnover that was completely different to what had accurately been filed to the HMRC via our accountant.
So you're actually suggesting that not only did they not use the calculation correctly in terms of what you'd presented to them, they'd actually found some other figure from some other wherever it was to calculate it. Is that right?
Yeah, they like I said, I've still got no justification of where these figures have come from. I would say that the turnover figures are probably a couple of thousand out, but obviously it would still affect the actual liability amount to begin with. Okay, so the arrears balance would have been, I would have said, about 15,000 by this point.
15,000. So you had a nil assessment for 5 years, hadn't been working, but then just started a business, and all of a sudden you have £15,000 that you're expected to pay.
Yes.
And so
yes.
You've asked the CMS to provide some form of information to how they got to that number, which is what most parents out there would do. Okay, so that must have been quite shocking to have that quite large, small fortune expected of you. So
yeah,
what was your next move in that regard?
Well, when we found out that they were adding all these arrears on, obviously the mental health state of my partner at the time had seriously declined, and it was it was quite brutal, I must admit, because he had no income, and he was then sort of thinking, well, how the hell am I meant to afford and pay these arrears that are, one, incorrect, and two, there's no income. So he ended up going to his GP and being prescribed some antidepressants, tablets for it. And I had pretty much agreed to kind of like take over everything and deal with it myself.
Which is a courageous thing to do, to be honest. And so the burden was on you.
It was extremely difficult at the time, but I was adamant that I was going to fight until the end.
Well, which is quite amazing. But what I'm interested in finding out is that you said that your partner, can we say his name?
Yeah, Simon.
So Simon, we're thinking about your brother. So at that time, his mental health had declined. How was he managing that, other than going to the GP? What was going on for him? What were the symptoms of the extent of the pressure that the CMS had placed upon him?
He became very reserved. He wouldn't talk much.
Yeah.
Anytime, like, I kind of felt, because I was going through it, I felt it was still really important to keep him updated. And it kind of wasn't really registering with him. And I think that's just because he was trying not to kind of like work himself up about the situation. It did get to the point where he thought, like, what's the point? What's the point of me being here?
So you're indicating that he had some kind of suicidal ideation, and
yeah.
Did it just stay there? Were you able to get him out of that, or was it more serious than that?
When he knew that there was some sort of progress, I just said, bear with me. I'm doing all I can do. I was quite fortunate to be getting some advice from some other people as well. And I ended up doing quite a lot of research myself. And I knew that a lot of the information that was being provided to me wasn't the correct information.
Information from the CMS? Or information?
Yeah, the CMS would tell me certain things which I knew were untrue.
Like what? Can you give an example of what that might be? I'm sure there's plenty.
So partway through, when obviously we found out about the arrears being added on, we were actually notified by letter. I've got 2 letters here, which I've highlighted. Massive arrears had arrived on the account. And because there was still no income to pay these arrears, the resident parent was notified that we would be making these payments, which obviously wasn't the case. So we had received 2 collect and pay letters unless we provided evidence that we'd, made some of these payments. So I was told by one that they can only add the collect and pay charge from the date that they were notified of the first date of missed payment. I've also, when I done my own research to work out about these arrears, they'd actually backdated the collect and pay charges to July 2015.
Wow.
So
we're looking at 5 years worth of backdated arrears that's accumulated.
Which they're not allowed to do. And again, I've got that in black and white. One person saying in black and white, it's only backdated to the date that the resident parent notified them of a missed payment. And I've got another letter that states that it's backdated to 2015.
So why do you think they thought that they could do that then?
I think that they probably didn't realise how clued up I am on it.
Kylie provides steps you can take going through child maintenance system, intrusive and abusive. Investigations next episode.